welcome to the Go Higher Frequency Astrology channel. My name is Suzanne. Join me as I investigate how the transits are progressing forward with a focus on how we can use this time more productively. Today, I'm going to be looking at the Libra Ingress, which happens the day after the solar eclipse. And I'm going to be analyzing this ingress in light of the dramatic turn of events that we all experienced in the last couple of days, as well as how this ingress highlights the rest of this year. So if you're interested in this content, please stick around. The Libra Ingress, or the fall equinox, is the beginning of our descent into the underground. We are now at the full moon point of the Aries Ingress. It's a time when we reap what we've sown. It's the harvest, the material manifestations of our prior efforts, the culling of the fruit from the seeds we've planted since the Aries Ingress. In my eclipse videos, I've been talking about this time as a unique opportunity to wake up, to see what's happening around you from a different perspective, a perspective from the other side of the wheel. I also mentioned the Uranus-Pluto conjunction from the 60s, which was activated during the full moon eclipse. And recent events are congruent with the themes I highlighted. Eclipses are known to eclipse people or situations from our lives, people or situations that have served their purpose and are ready for transmutation. A specific solar eclipse and Libra Ingress happening just a day after harkens back to the karmic resetting of the wheel in early January, and the inauguration, which happened when the South Node was at 29 degrees of Virgo. The day after I released my solar eclipse video, there was an assassination of a popular right-wing leader who happened to also be extremely divisive in his rhetoric. His funeral is scheduled for the day of this eclipse. He's the latest of quite a few political attacks and assassinations that have happened this year, on both the right and the left. People are now publicly comparing this time to the 60s because of this political violence. But you see, this time is different. We are seeing it from the opposite side of the wheel. The current leader being elevated as a martyr by many on the right is certainly someone whose beliefs were polar opposite of someone like Martin Luther King. And you can see the theme of divisive rhetoric in the inauguration chart, with a Mercury in Capricorn opposing a retrograde Mars in Cancer. The eclipse has now brought Jupiter near this opposition to teach us something about this divisive rhetoric. We will continue to learn about this as Jupiter goes retrograde in Cancer in November, and Mars and Mercury dance closely together through the rest of this year and into the next. I saw a scapegoat in the solar eclipse chart, someone or a class of people to pin the blame on for all of societal ills. And that class of people is defined increasingly by those in power as the people on the left. And all the people they dump into the so-called leftist ideology, whatever that means to them at any given moment. We are now seeing the cancel culture that was once so derided by the right being celebrated now that it's on the other side. No one seems to see the irony of this, justifying the cancel culture as somehow deserved this time. Remember, the political violence has been both from the right and the left. But the violence on the left is not being used to go after extreme right-wing hate speech. Where was the anger for the Democratic senators who were gunned down in their homes by someone on the radical right? Why aren't we going after those extremists too? We are now seeing an exploitation of this tragedy to go after perceived enemies on the left. This will weaken our two-party system even further and will galvanize the right to focus their anger on a common enemy rather than distractions like the Epstein files. So now let's look at the Libra Ingress chart located in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of cardinality in this chart, which means the energy is action-oriented. But the chart is also largely cadent and heavier in air, which highlights a focus on words and ideas, finishing up things in the environment rather than starting anything decisively new. Saturn is exalted in Libra, and according to the Kabbalah, Saturn is the yin force, the binah, or divine understanding. And remember, the Libra Ingress is a time of judgment, a reflection period of our past efforts. And interestingly, Saturn is in an out of sign opposition to the Sun in this Libra Ingress. The marriage of Saturn and Pisces, and likewise Saturn and Neptune, is contradictory, with Saturn symbolizing structure and separation, and Neptune symbolizing the dissolving of boundaries and oneness. The Sun, being in the sign of Saturn's exaltation, infuses Saturn with more strength than it would otherwise have in Pisces. Meanwhile, while the Sun is in the sign of its fall, Neptune is in the sign of its exaltation. So Neptune infuses the Sun with martial energy. So while this combination of planets usually describes a dampening of the spirit from emotional upsets, the energy for karmic retribution is high. The energy for karmic retribution is further supported by Saturn's retrograde back into the human design gate of crisis, the line of justice, on September the 25th, the day after the Mars-Pluto closing square on the 24th. Expect a continued heightened level of intensity the week after the eclipse. We're still on the cross of the vessel of love, still fixated on the themes of identity, but we've advanced to a different line here. Here it describes the prima donna, or a difficult and demanding nature that succeeds despite its behavior because of the depth of its talents, or unrealistic demands and an offensive nature of egocentric mediocrity. The Sun is still sitting at the apex of this kite formulation, now just past a square to the ascendant and descendant of this chart, which is at the 29th degree of Sag and Gemini. The Sun rules the 8th house, dealing with issues of mortality and our karmic contracts or debts with other nations. The Sun's ruler Venus sits in the 8th house, still in Virgo, the gate of openness, and the Sabian symbol of this degree specifically speaks to the issues of racial prejudice. The Sun, Mercury, Moon, and Midheaven are all ruled by this Venus, with Mercury and Venus still the final dispositors of this chart and in mutual reception. Like the solar eclipse, Mercury is still in the human design gate symbolizing correction, but now it's in a line labeled incompetence, describing an energy of indecisiveness and anxiety, and leaning on others for support. The Moon is separated from a conjunction to Mercury in gate 48, the gate of depth, and in the line of degeneracy. It's about whether we are confident enough to stand up for ourselves, or whether we are going to sink into degeneracy by the weight of the forces around us. Mars has just entered Scorpio in the sign of its exaltation, and even more powerful in the 10th house. Mars also rules the 4th and the 11th houses in this chart. It's now closer to squaring Pluto in the 1st house, and it is in an out-of-sign trine to the descendant, which is 1 degree away from Cancer. Mars is still in the human design gate 50, the gate of values. And while it's no longer in the line describing corruption, the theme describes a perverse reaction to rebel against the methodology that has previously brought one success. Jupiter, the ruler of the ascendant, is now more fully in the 7th house. It's about the expansion of detail. And in this line, it's about the routine of detail and whether one can either transcend routine through the expansion of detail, through fantasy, or by ignoring the detail altogether. It reminds me of the conspiracy theories surrounding the detailed text released by the FBI just recently, and the very careful dissection of what we see or pay attention to from our leaders. We experience people differently based on what values we ourselves hold and what we want to see or don't want to see about them. And this is about our life experiences so far, what we've been conditioned by, and very much about stuck trauma and how that feeds into our fear for the future. One thing I know for sure by studying astrology and people is that we are all different and we see from different filters. I have to remind myself of this often, as I have been repeatedly aghast and perplexed by the posts I've seen this year. I'm not going to comment on whether my reality is more right than your reality. How can you make that judgment? We are all born into different realities, And we either expand our perspective to include other points of view or we don't. I think we are all given chances, but it really depends on where you are at in your journey at any given time. And I surely can't judge what is right or what is wrong. I just know what is right for me. Some people think they can force their perspective on everyone, that everyone is motivated in the same way. They think force is the only thing that works. And some people seem to respond to this tough love approach. One of the most important things I learned from human design is about the concept of the invitation. I'm a projector in human design, so the invitation is crucial to my specific design, but I think everyone can benefit from understanding the invitation. People can only hear you when they're ready to hear, when they're open to learning about your perspective. So I'll tell you a little story to further elaborate on this idea. Recently, I was invited by a friend to attend a masterclass of somebody that I had admired from afar. And since I live my life by the invitation, I was thinking it was a good invitation because it was from somebody that I trusted. She invited me. But then I later realized that when talking to this person, that they weren't right for me. I realized they taught in a way that would be harmful to me. This person desired people who could learn in a very specific and rigid way. It's an old school way of teaching, similar to that tough love approach where you trigger people into awakening. Like I said, that might work for some people. Some people really need to be pushed, but I don't. I have serious trauma here, and I experience this type of teaching as abusive. It actually impedes my process, but this is a specific pattern of mine. I have been in the habit of bumbling along, thinking everything will be okay because I'm drawn to someone or something. And somebody might have invited me into a situation. So I think this is right. I should go. And I didn't really understand this pattern until I was near my Chiron return. And I'm still clearly working through this. I've needed to learn to ask more questions when someone invites me into a situation. I've needed to learn to trust myself when I hear alarm bells go off. I've been in the habit of excusing my alarm bells and thinking it will be okay when I know very well it won't. It takes time for me to really process information that I receive in the moment. I don't process things fully in the moment. I feel things, but I don't quite understand what I'm feeling or why. And I've had to practice taking my time to feel into situations. And that's really about building trust with other people. And I was about ready to enter a situation where alarm bells had gone off and I was habitually swapping them away because of this admiration I had and this trust that I had with this other person that had invited me. But I need to trust the teacher, and I didn't know him well enough to trust him. So thankfully, something happened in that meeting that brought me to my senses, and I woke up. Rewiring your self-destructive habits takes time, and sometimes we have to fail a couple of hundred times until we work our way out of that pattern. This was a win for me, and I'm thankful for it. I had to be ready to hear the alarm bells, and I had to learn to trust myself. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that this is a very important theme for everyone this year. We need to pay more attention. We need to ask more questions. We all need to wake up to see the reality that is in front of us. And yes, I do think we are all active creations in our own reality. But a part of that is really seeing clearly to understand what needs to change. If we live in a constant state of fantasy, that will only take us so far. So visualize the world you want to live in, but see the reality of the world you are living in right now so you can figure out what active steps you need to get to the world you visualized. That's a practical way to manifestation, in my opinion. I'm not sure if it works any other way, but I'm open to hearing about it from your perspective. There are certain things that I visualized that I found myself in at some future point, but there are a lot of steps in between. And I know that I was just following my true north to get where I wanted to go. Okay, back to this chart. When you place the Libra Ingress around the Sibley chart, you see that Mars and Pluto are in the 11th and 2nd houses. I feel like this symbolizes the power struggles with the Federal Reserve and the upcoming budget fight that may lead to a governmental shutdown. And then we have the Supreme Court hearing arguments about the legality of the tariffs, which will be decided, I think, sometime in November. This upcoming decision about the legality of the tariffs aligns with the nodes finally leaving the axis of oppression, or gate 47, versus social openness, or gate 22, to the axis of confusion, or gate 64, versus doubts, gate 63, the alpha and omega, moving from the conflict of the mental versus emotional center to both gates centered in the mind. I see something disruptive happening in October that will scramble us more than we are scrambled right now, if that's possible. The nodes will move quickly through these gates, and then they'll shift into a tribal channel of community that is centered here in the ego and emotional center. Something may push us into taking more definitive sides. And depending on your chart, you will either see this happening in your environment, or you will be an active participant, and you may be forced into taking sides by the people around you. It really depends on if you have any connections to gate 37 or gate 40 in this tribal channel. I do see in the new moon in October chart that there is this theme of someone standing up to the politicization of our laws and the idea that kings are not above the law. And that might be what pushes us into the period of confusion and doubt. Something might happen during this new moon. And meanwhile, Pluto will be out of bounds until Thanksgiving. And we've already been seeing the out of bounds nature of Pluto in places like Nepal, where the Gen Zs over there basically forced a collapse of the current government. All in all, it appears that the intensity and acts of retribution, this angry rhetoric, will continue through the end of the year and into next year as we head toward the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Look toward the moon in this chart, symbolizing the people. It's important that we stick up for ourselves and the people around us. Do not give in to these dark forces by giving up. Maintaining our courage and inner light is important during this time. Don't let the darkness drown out your spirit. Join forces with the people who hold the same values as you do. Motivate each other and hang on. I am reminded of the description of Gate 36, line 6, which includes this phrase, the knowledge and attendant faith that the powers of darkness eventually destroy themselves. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad.